LessWrong post the first. Wrong questions.
Hey, all right. This one's fun.
It was a good one.
Yeah, and it's a 2-minute read. This is near the introduction of the reductionism sequence, and recognizing a wrong question is core to that.
Yes.
And a wrong question, if I'm summarizing this correctly in a sentence, is a question that can't conceivably be answered.
Yeah, because for some reason your mind is cutting against the grain of actual reality.
Right.
You can't answer the questions on your own terms. He says you can only dissolve them by understanding the cognitive algorithm that generated the perception of a question.
I love that he keeps referring to the standard example of the tree falling in the forest. Enosh thinks that if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, it doesn't make a sound, and I think it does. What would it mean for either of us to actually be right?
Right.
He puts here in italics, well, it would have to mean that sound, quote-unquote sound, really means only acoustic vibrations or really means only auditory experiences. Yeah. What it really means.
Right, yeah.
So that's one form of wrong question.
He says, if this one doesn't work for you, here's a couple other ones where it seems like you can't even possibly answer the question. That's a good cue that it might be a wrong question. One of the questions he put forth was, do I have free will? Another one, which I like, I really like this one. Why does anything exist at all? Like, what would it even mean to have an answer to that question, right?
Yeah. His answer to not the question itself, but to his response to the question is, and no, I don't know the answer to that one, but I can guess one thing based on my previous experience with unanswerable questions. It will not consist of some grand triumphant first cause. The question will go away as a result of some insight as to how my mental algorithms run skew to reality, after which I'll understand that the question itself was wrong from the beginning. Yeah. I tried this with ChatGPT. I asked it just straight up, why does anything exist? And it gave me the bullet points of, here's the philosophical explanation, here's the yada yada, and then I cut and paste the entire post and said, given that, why does anything exist? And it didn't give me any better answers, unfortunately. I thought it would understand the spirit of wrong questions. I didn't like track it back and try and push back with no, this is a wrong question, try to answer it correctly.
Yeah.
But it tried to answer the question, right?
Yeah.
Which I guess makes sense. It's
being asked the question. It's trying to be a good little intern.
It's GTP4. It's not gonna be like, you're asking a wrong question.
Right.
Let me explain to you what really the solution is here. Yeah.
Allow me to lay out these sequences that will cross the inferential gap.
It just wants to help.
Yeah. I love this line, and I don't know if this is the first time this appears in the sequences. I think we've probably seen it before, but again, it's just something that stuck with me a lot. He says, maybe for the first time, maybe again, if I am ignorant about a phenomenon, that is a fact about my state of mind, not a fact about the phenomenon itself. Just really good to keep in mind whenever you run into something that seems mysterious and unknowable. I think the best example for clarifying this in my mind was if you flip a coin but don't look at it, put it like under a cup or something. What is the chances that it's heads? It's 50-50, because even though there is one real state of the world where it's either heads or tails, so it's 100% one or the other in the real world, the question is a question about your knowledge. Like, the mysteriousness is in my mind, and so it is unknown.
Yeah, mystery exists in reality, or mystery exists in the mind, not in reality.
Yes. The coin is not in a superposition of one or of both of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And I can't remember if that's the first appearance of this or not. I know it appears in Methods of Rationality verbatim as well, so
okay.
It's hard to remember when I first read this, but it's one of those ones that would make a good bumper sticker, coffee mug, or something.
The last thing I pulled out of here is that he says such questions must be dissolved.
That's what I was going to pull out too.
Yeah. The answer doesn't let you make any new predictions, even in retrospect, and the phenomenon still possesses the same sacred inexplicability that it had at the start. The answer gives you shit.
Right. He ends this post by saying, coming tomorrow, a simple trick for handling wrong questions.
Which brings us to writing a wrong question. I was going to ask if you want to make a guess, but we already read the post, so we know what it is.
I wouldn't have guessed it, actually. I
probably wouldn't have either. No.
I've read this before, but it's been a long time. So if I pose a question at you, like, do we have free will? Mm-hmm. Given that there's so much baggage with basically every term in that question, you can say that's a wrong question and answer instead. There's an actual answerable question that you can just dig out of that, which is, why do I think I have free will?
Yeah.
And that one has a clear path to answer it, right?
I don't even have problems with free will, but I pulled out a couple other of these here that I really liked, where he says, why does time move forward instead of back? The correct answer is, why do I think time moves forward instead of backwards? And why was I born as myself rather than someone else? Why do I think I was born as myself rather than someone else? And when you think about it that way, it's much easier to dissolve the question.
It certainly helps illustrate, or it helps illustrate how the original phrasing is completely incoherent.
Yeah.
There's no way I could answer the question, why am I born me and not someone else?
Yeah.
I can answer why I think I am, that, but all that really does actually is just spotlight how incomprehensible the first question really is.
Right.
The fun thing being an identical twin is I was asked a couple of times, once by like some younger kid of like, how do you know who you are? And all I can think is like, I know who I am. I'm standing right here.
Yeah.
He's over there. That was not a hard question to answer. But why was I born me and not somebody else? Who knows, man? But why do I think that? Honestly, that question's harder to answer than the first, because that question's not a mystery to me. Why was I born me and not somebody else? Yeah. But the first one that you had, why does time move forward, not backward? That one's fun. Yeah. I think it does, because it seems to me that things happen one after the other.
Right.
Is that the actual explanation of the phenomena? Shrug.
It would be impossible for me to think otherwise, because that's how thoughts propagate.
It seems that way. Unless you're Dr. Manhattan. And since none of us are.
Yeah. Well, I did have a couple issues with this post, though, as it went along. He gave the example of why am I wearing socks? You can always resolve any question this way. Why do I think I'm wearing socks? Which goes to, well, I see the light that has bounced off my socks, which makes the impression in my brain, and the light bounced off my socks because there's socks on my feet, and going forward there. So he's like, you can answer the question, why am I wearing socks, by going through a longer chain. But then he goes, why is there a lake in the middle of the desert? Asking why is there a lake in the middle of the desert may fail if there is no lake to be explained. But why do I perceive a lake in the middle of the desert always has a causal explanation one way or the other. The implication being that either there is a lake there and you're seeing it, or there isn't a lake there but you're seeing a reflection off the atmosphere, etc. to get the lake mirage. I don't think this helps in the least. Because it doesn't tell you whether there is a lake there or not. You'd have to already know that there is or isn't a lake there.
I mean, in the specific case of the desert lake, if you have the luxury of sitting and thinking about it and you're not dying of dehydration, you might notice, deserts don't usually have big lakes. Why is there a lake there?
But sometimes they do. There are oases.
There are. But then you might, if you thought to think to yourself, why do I think there's a lake there? Oh, right, there's mirages. I've heard about those.
Right, but how can you tell from your position whether that is light coming to your eyes from a mirage or light coming to your eyes from an actual oasis?
I mean, I guess you can't without going to check. But the point of it is that the first question might actually just be a wrong question, though. Why is there a lake in the desert? There isn't. That's the answer, right? If it's a mirage. Yeah. Why do I perceive a lake? Well, because either there's a lake or I'm seeing a mirage. Okay.
I see. So it's a dissolving of that as opposed to just assuming that there is a lake right there.
Right. Okay. Why do I think I'm wearing socks? Because I can see them and I put them on and I remember doing them. All of that's true. Mm-hmm. Why do I see the lake? One answer is that you don't. Mm-hmm. And so that's asking the wrong question. Mm-hmm. But the right question is, why do I think I see one? Yeah. And then that way, yeah, you could still go chase it down, but at least you're asking the right question.
Yeah.
You won't be surprised in that case if you don't come across water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you probably still want to chase it down just in case there is a lake there.
Just in case.
Unless it's taking you in the opposite direction of where you think there's probably a well.
Try not to get lost in the desert.
Solid advice. Have one of those maps of the areas that you can explore and don't go past it.
Right. And if some guy who insists that he knows where he's going, but it's been 3 or 4 years, I just start to think, I don't think this guy knows where he's going.
Right.
I made that joke about Moses, right?
I think you did.
Yeah. I stole it from Jim Gaffigan.
Okay.
But his whole thing is 40 years? You think after a while they'll be like, I don't think he knows where he's going.
I mean, the shitty part was that God specifically did that to them on purpose to punish them.
God, what was it they did? He was so pernicious in his punishments.
Yeah, he was really petty.
Yeah. Because they were exiled, but
they escaped from Egypt. I maybe it was the worshiping of the golden calf. No, because they killed all the people that were doing that. I don't remember, but there was some kind of thing they did that he was like, "All right, you guys are going to wander in the desert for 40 years because fuck you." So no matter what, they were going to be wandering for 40 years. They had no choice in the matter.
Well, unless you find yourself in that situation.
Okay,
we've come a little far afield. But.
Don't piss off God is the moral of the story. He also has one thing where he's talking about the free will and dissolving the question, why do I think I have free will? Where he says, where's the free will sensor in your brain and how does it detect the presence or absence of free will? How does the sensor interact with the sensed event and what are the mechanical details of the interaction? I kind of think, again, this is bullshit because I mean, I do believe in free will, but not in the magical sense. I have a completely different idea of, it is the algorithm is within you, and that is what it means to have free will. The algorithm that decides what's to do. But you can say this like about any abstract idea.
I actually like that paragraph because it has the line, how would it detect the presence or absence of free will? Because for people who are like, the standard, like, oh no, I believe in the standard definition of free will and that's my thing. It's like, what would it look like if you didn't have that?
Right.
And that isn't a question I think those people have asked themselves. Or how would you notice if you didn't? Does your internal algorithm, would it be able to spot the lack of this?
If it didn't have an internal algorithm, you wouldn't make decisions.
I guess. I mean, you'd still be doing stuff, right?
No.
Okay. So we're working on different... We'll hash this out in a different thing. But,
all right. Like there's a series of neurons that fire that come to a certain decision, and if they weren't doing that, then there wouldn't be any decision made. Basically, you'd be a corpse.
All right. Well, I mean, I was gonna... We'll
some
table
other day.
that. Yeah. It'll be fun.
I do think it's kind of the bullshit to say that like there is an abstract thought or principle or rule, and if there is no way to mechanically detect it by an organ in your brain, then it probably doesn't exist.
I'm trying to think of an example that actually works for. I mean, how do I know I'm conscious? Like, or rather, what is consciousness versus like, why do I think I'm conscious?
I think it's actually a pretty good one.
Yeah, but so I'm trying to think of like examples that I would be as steadfast against as you are that you're drawing contention with here, but I can't think of any right off. He does say that if your belief does derive from valid observation of a real phenomena, we will eventually reach that fact if we start tracing the causal chain backwards from your belief.
I mean, that's fair. I do think that there is a series of steps encoded in neurons in your brain that come to decisions based on the inputs in them.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that adequately explains that, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to necessarily, work on a sense organ, I don't think, right?
Right.
It can all be internal. I don't think he is arguing here that it has to be some, well, he does say observed phenomena, but again, you can observe things happening inside your own head with your eyes closed. Again, it doesn't have to be something that you notice out in the world. But then he goes on to say, if what you are really seeing is your own confusion, tracing back the chain of causality will find an algorithm that runs skew to reality, which links to the wrong questions.
Yeah.
Which is nice, because if you're, I'm trying to think of an example. I should have done this because I read these, yesterday or earlier today, thinking of a time that I righted a wrong question by noticing like, oh yeah, I was actually just confused. I mean, this happens every time actually, where you think there's some problem with anything mechanical that you're trying to fix, and you do the thing and then it's still broken. I thought I observed this, but I guess I didn't. I observed something else, right?
Like when you were fixing the microphone
yeah,
just before.
Exactly. I tightened the wrong screw because it was wiggly from a secret part underneath it, not from the part that I could see. And I noticed after I'm confused that it's still loose, but whatever. I guess that's it. But yeah, so it's the kind of thing where, I mean, I feel stupid because every time I try to think of like off the cuff examples, they're always like really simple, small things like that. But how often do grand, interesting things happen? So
very rarely do you have to solve free will in your life.
Yeah, not often.
I like that he leaves us with the advice that like, yeah, we're tracing back the chain of causality to find where the algorithm went wrong. And he says, look, you even got a nice concrete place to begin tracing your belief sitting there solidly in your mind. Once you have a starting place, you can just follow it.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Well, what LessWrong post are we talking about next time?
Well, it looks like we're doing the mind projection fallacy, one of my favorites.
That is a really good one, and one that I have a lot of problem with.
Oh, I think everyone does.
I think me more than most people.
That sounds like the mind projection fallacy. But we'll have to see.
The one after that is the quotation is not the referent.